Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah thumma alhamdulillah wa ma tawfiqi wa i'tisami illa billah. Alaika tawakkaltu wa ilaika unib. Alhamdulillah al-khail alladhi najahadu fina lanahdiyannahum subulana wa inna Allah lama'al muhsinin. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Respected Brother Chairman Terusli, esteemed rakan-rakan pimpinan penyelenggara dan peserta ulama dan juga dari persidangan antarabangsa, termasuk juga Azmi, Ustaz Mawang dan Ustaz Ghani, Timbalan Presiden PAS, sahabat saya Muhammad Sabu, tetamu-tamu kehormat yang saya muliakan, seperti mana disebut, rencana ini desakan untuk terus meningkat kesedaran rakyat dan menuntut perubahan di peringkat dasar dalam negara dan luar negara untuk menegakkan keadilan bagi semua. Itu perlu kewajipan. Umat Islam menyaksikan malapetaka yang dahsyat. Tetapi satu isu yang menyentuh hati nurani kita sejak awal, utama manusia, Palestin, kedudukan yang tidak tertentu di Aqsa, masih mendera rakyat. Sebab itu saya anggap persidangan ini dan inisiatif ini sangat bermakna. Dan saya rasa semua kalangan dari semua kecenderungan politik faham untuk membulatkan usaha, menumpu perhatian, mengangkat kesedaran dan memastikan satu isu yang menyentuh perasaan hati nurani dan yang menyaksikan derita yang sekian lama. Tidak boleh kita bergantung kepada dunia luar, tidak boleh kita mengharapkan kepada kuasa-kuasa besar, kerana akhirnya sejarah Palestin membuktikan bahawa umat Islam sendiri mesti berdiri menjadi tunggak yang boleh memperjuang dan membela nasib rakyat Palestin manakala ditindas dan didera oleh rejim Zionis Israel dengan dukungan kuasa barat, khususnya Amerika Syarikat. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a profound pleasure that I join you here today. Brother Jose has been kind, but it's true. One of the earlier struggles that we understood when we were young, when we were students, was to highlight the plight, struggle, sufferings of the Palestinian people. We know no ideology, no difference in terms of mazhab, no political differences. Our focus was justice for the Palestinian people. I remember in 1973, one of the first major demonstrations that I led was against the United States, and we went to the embassy. One of the first few occasions we got arrested. We didn't know any Palestinian leader. At that time only Yasser Arafat. We don't know about the context of the struggle, but we know that injustice has been perpetrated against the Palestinian people. Only later, by the way, incidentally, that because of that demonstration, the AIA, which was the building that hosted the embassy, decided that they will not allow US embassy to be stationed or rented at the AIA building all over the world. So we had a small role there. By 1983, I was fortunate to attend the first major conference of the PLO, chaired by then Yasser Arafat, where I got to be directly involved and to know them personally and to listen to the views of all the various groups and factions within the PLO. We invited then Yasser Arafat and the older leaders prior to Hamas, Farouk Kadoumi and the rest, and we even had organized rallies, including at the universities here, first major public rallies to support the Palestinian cause. I was fortunate recently again to meet Khalid Mash'al, to listen to him and the initiatives taken, and there was particularly a day after the attempt or initiative to meet to resolve differences with Fatah, because the general feeling of the Muslims is that we can only fight the aggressors with a united front. The rest is, of course, for the Palestinian leaders to decide and determine. But what have we learned from the tragedy of Palestine? I want to encapsulate a phrase used by a Palestinian Christian, Edward Said, whom I had great admiration for his steadfast, strong position vis-a-vis Palestine and his refusal to support any peace initiative with Israel under pressure by the United States if the issue of Palestine, the rights of Palestinians are not resolved. That is what he termed as politics of dispossession. There's a central issue in the issue of Palestine. People make it into various interpretations, but the basic principle is that they have been dispossessed of their basic right as a citizen, as a human being, and their land has been taken, dispossessed from their right and their land. This issue seems to be off tangent when we discuss with many Westerners, Europeans or Americans. I used to teach at the Georgetown University, and of course in a very series of dialogues all over the premier institutions, from Harvard to Stanford to Georgetown to Johns Hopkins, students were alerted, and invariably, because of my statement on the Palestinian cause, this question will be raised. Why is it that Fatah refused to recognize Israel? Why is it that you have violence perpetrated by the Palestinians against Israel? Well, they missed a basic point, I told them. The issue is again dispossession. Your land, your house, your property, your basic right as a human being has been robbed from you. And you talk about the repercussions, reaction towards this gross injustice perpetrated. So I think that discourse, that language, the discourse must be made very clear. In the media, in international media, now you talk about bombs or some strikes, one or two, including at times we become very disgusted because of another attack by the Palestinians, by the Israelis against Palestine. But I think we must always remind ourselves, political leaders, civil society and NGOs and the media, that the central issue of Palestine, which cannot be resolved unless the issue of dispossession this has been very consistent indeed. Now I want to give you a small fact, because we have been asked to raise support and funds for the Palestinian cause. But we must not fail to realize that the continued siege of Gaza, which Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan referred to as a prison, okay, imprisonment of the entire Gaza, has cost 35% of the annual GDP, which means an average of 3.4 billion US dollars lost due to the restrictions alone. Now, we can raise, and although our focus is to get a united resolve, you also must not ignore the fact that if governments, if societies are not dictated by the principle of haqq, to reject batil, to promote justice, it's very difficult for us to expect them to support a just cause for the Palestinians. That is why we have all the resources in the world. We still have the richest states in the world, but we cannot even afford to give decent food and medicine to the sufferings of our people, be it in Palestine or close to the borders, the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. So we find conflicts after conflicts, from Afghanistan to Syria to Palestine, but complete abandonment of the principles of justice because the failure of Muslims, particularly leadership, to take a principled stand, independent principled stand against aggression and injustice all over the world. But this, to my mind, is relevant. You can talk ad infinity. The cows come home about the plight of the Palestinian cause. We can try and raise a few million here and there, but we cannot deny the fact that unless the issue of leadership and governance in Muslim countries is resolved, people who have that empathy, not only about the Palestinians, not because Al-Quds is there, not because they're Arabs or Palestinians, but because of the principle of justice of haqq against batil that we as Muslims have been trained as part of our faith to try and resolve. That is my position, because contrary to those who have been talking about the solution to the Palestinian cause, I happen to be just the last few days in Ankara, had lengthy discussions with Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, almost 2 hours with him, and with President Abdullah Gül. And it's interesting enough, although I was talking about my court case or Malaysian issues or bilateral relations, Turkey and Malaysia, but we came back without fail to discuss the fundamental problematic crisis and tragedy of the world, that is the Palestinian question. And our common stand is, again, the issue of dispossession. And the fact of the failure of, don't talk about the failure of America. I mean, my colleagues always say that I am a bit soft. I'm not soft on the United States. But people tend to use this as a pretext to cover the crimes that they commit. I remember when we were talking about Abu Ghraib prisons, how much we condemn the Americans. I was addressing a crowd in Doha, and there was a strong representation from the Palestinians, the international conference. And there was this unanimous condemnation of the United States over the treatment of Abu Ghraib prison. And I, of course, I said, yes, I endorse. I have no doubt about that. The United States must be condemned for the treatment of Iraqis in Abu Ghraib prison. Then I continued. What about our prisons? Of course, the Arab delegates were not too happy. But where is the Islamic consistent stand if you talk about justice and principles and morality, and you condemn others, which is right, but silent and muted when it comes to atrocities in our own backyard? I'm not talking my personal experience, because as you know, I was assaulted to near death in our lockup under police custody. But this is small compared to what my Palestinian brothers and sisters have to endure in Israeli prison. But we will have a strong, a moral high ground if we say, look, this is our democracy, our justice, this is how we treat our prisoners if we have to. This is our courts, which is independent, respecting the rule of law. This is our media, which is free to even criticize our leaders. That is why we condemn the West or Israel for the atrocities committed against us. Half the problem inflicted upon our brothers in Palestine can be resolved. Wallah al-Azim, I am convinced if leaders in the Muslim world have that courage, resolve, not corrupt, and again, committed to fight and struggle for justice. I applaud brothers, particularly in Indonesia, which has been extremely active and vigilant in their struggle, in their campaign, in support of the Palestinian cause. And I think, consistent with the theme of this short lecture, is to call upon our friends in the region, which is the Ghuraba, far distant land from the Arab world in the Middle East, where the consciousness of the Palestinian cause must be there. But I think other than that, just a public sentiment, it is also a clear understanding that no change, yes, political rhetoric, yes, happy when you condemn the Western powers, but believe me, no change, no meaningful, effective change unless unless we are prepared to ensure that we form just societies, just governments with clear policies to uphold the principles of law and justice. And this is what we see as a tragedy of the Palestinian people. No law, no justice. Complete dehumanization. And people are silent. I was talking to Chibu Azmi, which you referred to, the statement by the Deputy Minister of Israel condemning Palestinians as probably half human beings. Can you imagine if there's a Muslim leader, a Muslim minister in any part of the world, from Nigeria to Indonesia, saying that, you know, the other races are just not fit to be called humans, immediately there will be international condemnation. Now, Israeli leaders mentioned that even the European Union has been quite muted, and they talk about human rights and principles of human rights. Not only European Union, Muslim governments and leaders and foreign ministers are still sleeping without any sense of anger or feeling enraged when people are abused and insulted. There is a problem with our faith, with our akhlaq, in our form of character or shakhsiyah when it comes to questions of justice. So thank you again for this opportunity. I chose not to read and bore you with the details about years and dates, because those who are here are more conversant on the subject. But I think I appeal to you to come back to the principle, the core of the message, and that is the commitment to our faith, and that the faith must translate in terms of coherent, consistent policies upholding justice. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.